thought episode 4 was kind of good when I rewatched it. I was like, oh yeah, I'm onto something. And I was thinking I could just go down another rabbit hole for episode 5. And I wanted to give a little bit of space because I didn't want to jump too hard into one subject. I mean, I could focus on one subject eventually over time, but I'm interested in many different things, and I would get bored if I just talked about Egyptian pyramids every time, because that's what I talked about in episode 4. But that led me down a totally different rabbit hole. I learned about how concrete is made, and concrete is actually pretty simple. Like the modern concrete, they have a lot of chemical additives and stuff that is more advanced that they use to make all sorts of properties for the concrete to build whatever you want and to have a bunch of different, durability ratings, and they can build it underwater. And it turns out concrete has been around for thousands of years. And, the more I learned about concrete and the more I looked at the limestone pyramid blocks, I was like, what if that was just their form of concrete and they just had way more limestone than what we use now because they had it everywhere? And it started to make more sense to me. But that's about all I really got into continuing on that topic, because really, I don't think we'll ever know the answers. I watched a lot of people try to use copper drills and sticks and sand to spend hours and hours and months drilling small little details. And I was like, they didn't build the pyramids like that. That would take too long. You would build something simple. If you had tools like that, you wouldn't build something magnificent because it would be a waste. Okay, I still have to set up the browser, which I should have done before I started recording. Oh, man. I think I'm forgetting something because it does seem to me like I did have not really another rabbit hole that I went down, but at least an interesting topic that I stumbled across in my internet journeys. So let me see if I can get the browser pulled up. And I find ancient history to be fascinating, and I find even modern history to be fascinating now that when I was in school, I thought history was so boring and I never really cared about it. But now I realize it's just because of the books they give you. Like, the textbooks are awful. They're just so boring. And they're just filled with rote, tedious information like dates and names and events and vocabulary words. And it's like, man, I just want to hear the story of what was going on. And the book wants you to be ready for a standardized test, which is great. But at the same time, I've learned a lot more about history as an adult with YouTube and books and Google than I ever learned in school. And it escapes me, but I know there was another topic that came up, so I'm trying to find this topic. One thing that I do find interesting is that I've been reading the Vedas and the Upanishads and a lot of the Hindu texts and stuff like that. And I'd always heard of this thing called the Vimana, which is the gods had these, basically they drove around in UFOs, but they called them Vimanas, and it was their airplanes and stuff. And it got me thinking, like, what if there aren't aliens, but what if there really was a Vimana and it just got lost to time and buried deep underground somewhere, and like they found that and then flew it around and crashed it, and that was Roswell, and they tried to cover it up, and people just kept looking into it. They said it was aliens to make everybody think it was aliens, but really it was just like some ancient vehicle, you know? And then they probably hid that one, and maybe they found other ones, and then they put them in S4. And when Bob Lazar got there, because Bob Lazar is this guy that is a physicist, and his story is that he worked in a place called S4 on all these, I guess, alien spacecraft, so to speak. But, I mean, he was just doing his one part of a government project, classified, top secret. You know, nobody knows all the details. So, what if they just gave him a story about Zeta Reticuli or something like that, and really it was just some ancient thing, which I know it just totally rewrites all human history if that's the case, but in a way, doesn't that make more sense than aliens? Like, maybe it was just a thing that somebody already had thousands of years ago, and it was lost to time, and the military found it, or somebody else's military found it, and ours inherited it. I mean, what if Rome found it? What if, Germany found it in World War II? What if, anybody could have found it. What if it was the Ark of the Covenant? It was actually a Vimana, aka a UAP, and it's been passed down through time. I don't know. This could all just be nothing. It could be not real at all. But to me, the more I've looked into the subject of aliens and UFOs, the more I've realized that it doesn't really seem like there's aliens. Because if there are, they're not showing up. I guess they want to act as if they don't exist. So it would be hard to definitively say. But could there be some highly advanced technology that we don't fully understand? Yeah, I think that could be possible. And could there have been ancient advanced civilizations before the catastrophe hit 12,000 years ago? Yeah, I think that could be possible. So maybe if they left something, you see how that starts to sound realistic, and then it's people. Like, people did it. It has nothing to do with aliens. It just has to do with humans. Or maybe other hominids that weren't the same species of humans that we are now, but still basically humans, So, I'm not saying that I have the answers to every single UFO report and FOIA request and anybody that had an abduction experience or anything like that, but as far as what's going on with the government, because imagine if the Air Force did find some highly advanced aircraft and they were testing it and they crashed it on some farmland, and some citizens knew about it, and there was a story and it was going to get out, and they had to say something. They had to make a statement. And so they said, oh, well, it's a crashed spacecraft or whatever, which it technically probably was. Okay? But it wasn't necessarily alien, but that's what people thought. And then they changed the story up. They said it was a weather balloon because they really didn't want people to know that they had it. And imagine if it was piloted by members of the Air Force and they died in the crash, and now there's deaths that are unaccounted for that have to be covered up. There's letters that have to be written to families and all this other stuff of and funerals, and you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a big tragedy, as well as maybe something that could expose some intelligence. Of course, I'm talking about Roswell right now. And actually, I've heard rumors that there was 2 crashes in Roswell. I don't know about the second one. The one I know about was, I believe, in 1947. So that's the one I'm talking about. I don't know about another Roswell crash. But I just think that would explain a lot. And it would also explain another case that I know about, which is in Australia, of all places, in this town called Alice Springs, Australia. The United States has a secret satellite base, and they have joint operations with the Australian Army and intelligence. And there was an event there one time, I think maybe in the 90s, like 1998, I want to say, but it could have been. So it's been a while, 20 years ago, a little more. Over 200 people saw unidentified flying, craft. UFC, if you will. Totally unrelated to anything about fighting, except it is a military base, but nonetheless, it was a large mass sighting, and several people claim to have been interrogated by members of the U.S. Army, basically told not to talk. And here we are, 20 years later, and they're telling their stories. So that's another indicator, a story that I've heard of, that maybe the United States could possibly have some advanced flying technology. Which, I mean, obviously, all the major world superpowers have advanced military technology. And they don't want to share every single detail. Like, I don't know. Unless you just know you have, like, it's kind of like they're playing poker with each other. It really is a problem because, I mean, you can't imagine if there actually was a World War III, it would be over. Humanity would destroy itself. We have access to things that are too powerful. I mean, think about how just the limitations of a man. Think about the limitations of a human being as far as knowing that you have to have self-control and discipline and integrity and, care about other people, be compassionate and empathetic and understanding. And you have to have all of these, like, high qualities, in order to have the humility to be responsible enough to command the fate of the entire species. Like, imagine if you had a button that if you press it, the planet explodes. I just scratched my finger. But imagine if every single person at some point in their life had access to that button. And don't even think of it as a button, think of it as an app on your phone. I mean, imagine you had an app called Destroy Everything, and if you press the button, it destroys everything. That's what it does, and anybody could download it for free. Or maybe not necessarily for free, but anybody could get access to it potentially. And everyone has to have that just self-control to never hit that button. And in a lot of ways, where technology has taken us as a species is kind of already there. I mean, if you think about even social media and all these algorithms and the way that they respond to people's interactions and activity on these systems, and the way that they cater their, I guess they cater their service, their content, whatever, to the users based on their interactions, and then they take all of that data that they get and then they sell it. And then they use their systems to put advertisements back in and target those, and then it just, but it's this giant self-perpetuating cycle because people keep putting things in to that system. And anyway, maybe I'm getting off topic here a little bit, but the point is, human civilization is at a place right now where it's not like unrealistic that humanity could destroy itself entirely. I mean, if you think about conquerors in the past, to conquer the world, they had to walk or they had to ride horses. If they were really smart, they rode horses or they built roads. If they were really incredibly smart, they came up with a way to do that. And then they used swords and bows and spears and horses and spread out and killed everybody and took over as much as possible. And it took decades and sometimes hundreds of years, and it's just crazy. Like, the extent that a group of people can go to cause destruction on the world. And the fact is, imagine now we live in a world where it wouldn't take much effort at all to cause massive destruction. And we all have to be responsible for that a little bit, because we all have access to these tools. It really trips me out. And that's the future. And that's why I don't think that we're ready for everything that's coming. Like, technology-wise, we ain't ready for it. I mean, you know, they're talking about putting people in virtual reality and putting chips in your brain that let you communicate. And it's like, are people really ready for that? Like, I don't think it's going to work. And also, I'm not sure if it's going to work because, I mean, don't you have to understand consciousness? You could understand the brain as a receiver and find a way to, like, tie into that, you know, connect to the brain. And when you connect to the brain with your device, then your device just sort of like links up to it and interfaces with the brain directly, and then you influence the consciousness by messing with the brain. But what if the consciousness isn't tied to the brain? I mean, it is. It seems to be, but it also seems to be tied into the whole body somehow, and also maybe not just the body physically, but a field around the body. I mean, it's just, look, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but it gets really weird. There's no one that really understands how consciousness works, and yet there's people trying to build technology in order to stick a chip in your brain. And they probably want to make you do stuff. They probably want to sell you things. They probably want to send ads to your brain. Force you to wake up at 5 a.m. to some cereal commercial. But anyway, it's just crazy, like, and it's so hard to predict what the next technology will be, because nobody really expected the internet or cell phones. I mean, cell phones were kind of, Star Trek kind of had a little cell phone. Uh, I mean, people knew cell phones were coming. You know, it was kind of predicted. But the internet itself and the advancement of like, once you have like smartphones and stuff like that, the Internet of Things, it is quite strange. It's like people are building these giant structures, these giant constructs, and these giant, I don't even know, like, in a way, like, some things are almost autonomous, like a corporation. Like, a corporation is a person according to the law. In reality, a corporation is like a group of people doing stuff, but also it's like a bunch of people doing a bunch of stuff, and nobody really knows exactly what everyone else is doing, but overall, it keeps going. It's like a government, kind of. It's like it becomes autonomous. And then all the technology they're building with all these new robots and all this AI and machine learning and trying to create devices to do all the work and all be controlled so that it's, you know, the elites can control everything. But it's like, who really, like, you're not going to live forever, and then who's going to be in control of it, and what are their intentions going to be, and will that even reflect what the people who create it even want? Like, it's almost like people are just thinking about doing all this crazy stuff, but no one's really working through the reality of what will happen over, like, not just a few years or a lifetime, but like over a few hundred years or a couple thousand. Like, it's crazy thinking about the pyramids so much because the pyramids were built thousands of years ago. And they were built clearly so that they would last for thousands of years. And here we are thousands of years later with all of this advanced technology, and all people can think about is like the next day, the next hour, the next 10 minutes, the next tweet, the next, you know? Even the most powerful, influential people can only think about like their lifetime and the next, 5-10 years, Nobody's aware of the implications of what they're doing on the scale of thousands of years. And people just want to say, oh, well, who cares? Because I'm going to die and it won't matter. But it's like, yeah, your body's going to die. But what if you have to come back? It's like, you don't know. Maybe if we're lucky and we die, nothing happens and it's over. But I don't know if it's that simple. And nobody really knows if it's that simple. Even with near-death experiences and past life memories and stuff like that, it's still hard to say what's going on. So maybe we should start to think on a scale that's longer term. And actually think about, taking care of stuff better. Like, everybody wants to talk about global warming and climate change, but nobody really wants to address all of the plastic in the oceans, which can be recycled and used and even turned back into diesel fuel. So it's like a sustainable source of fossil fuel that we could keep using and clean it up. You think it's just about carbon, but what if it's about all the junk that's everywhere? All the chemicals in the air, all the plastic and trash in the seas and in the dirt in the landfills, in forests, in the woods, off the sides of the road. All the junk in space surrounding the planet. there's so much space junk that NASA has to keep track of it, or else it might hit rockets or the space station or a satellite. So there's a lot to it.